Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. It's after 3:30, 3:42, and we are hereby called to order. We have our meeting minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had time to review them?
Yes. I'll move for approval.
It has been moved and properly seconded that the minutes from our last meeting be approved. All in favor say aye. Aye. So those are passed, and now we are to item 3, our zoning cases, the first of which is ZAC 2025-00010.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Sproul. I serve as the city zoning administrator. The first ZAC case on the agenda is 2025-10. This is a request to change zone district boundaries from D4, which is our medium density residential district, to D5, multiple dwelling district, in order to allow for a new development that will have townhomes, duplexes, and cottages. This is part of the Caraway redevelopment project. In your packets, we have a list of all the uses that are currently allowed in D4, and then those that will be allowed in D5. I'm not going to read over all of them because it'll take us forever. But the application before you today is to change the zoning from D4 to D5 for this residential development. The city's adopted long-range land use plan identifies this property as residential low for blocks F and G, and then blocks D2 and E are designated as mixed-use low, and block A is identified as mixed-use high. The comments from staff for landscaping, there will just be to be compliance with the City of Birmingham landscaping requirements for buffering and screening. All permits and ordinances related to stormwater shall apply for this development, as it'll be a brand new development. This property is not located in a special flood hazard area. The Department of Transportation did not have any comments regarding this particular phase of the development, and this location is in the north side, south side framework plan area. Because this property is in the middle of 3 different neighborhoods, the applicant did attend the Evergreen Neighborhood Association, the Druid Hills Neighborhood Association, and the Norwood Neighborhood Association. So originally there were 2 parts to this rezoning request. So the neighborhood votes were based off both proposed zoning changes, but one of those has been withdrawn. So the only zoning change before you today is the D4 to D5 piece. The Zoning Advisory Committee met on August 5th, 2025, and they did vote unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of the rezoning change from D4 to D5. And there are maps in your packet. I know it's confusing because there's multiple blocks, but we do have the applicant with us if you guys have questions for him today.
Okay, I don't think you mentioned the neighborhood votes on this.
Yes,
request.
well, so the neighborhood, we received a couple different votes from Evergreen. One of the votes we received was 0 to 4. Then another vote was 0 to 8. But once again, that included another rezoning piece. I think the vote would most likely have been different had that piece not been part of the application. That was withdrawn to rezone one of the properties from mixed use downtown to C2. And the Druid Hills neighborhood did vote 12 to 8 to support the request. And then they did alter their vote at another meeting, and it was 12-0 and then 13-3. And then the Norwood neighborhood did vote to recommend, but they had Q conditions that they recommended, but the Q conditions were only for, the commercial part of the rezoning request, and that part was withdrawn. So the Q conditions submitted for the Norwood Neighborhood Association, those are all uses that were allowed in the mixed-use downtown in C2. So those don't apply to the just D4 to D5 change. Does that make sense?
Mostly.
Okay.
Mostly makes sense. Okay, so we have the applicant here
Yes, ma'am.
who's going to explain all this.
Good afternoon, Brian Wolf with Corporate Realty. We're at 60 14th Street South, Suite 104 here in Birmingham. And Councilor Abbott, before we start, I want to thank you for your service for the past
Thank you.
substantial amount of years. You've done a great job serving this city, and we appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been a labor of love most of the time.
And I'm happy to answer any questions. And we do apologize. We filed really two different zoning classes on this property into one case. In hindsight, we really should not have done that, and I won't do that again. So we have pulled out the commercial aspect of the application. We got some great comments from ZAC. We're gonna rework that case, come back and refile it probably in the next couple weeks here.
Okay, well, tell us or show us exactly what you're doing.
Okay. If you'll look on your packet in our application, it's blocks D, E, F, and G. And what we're building is a medium-density residential community that'll be made up of townhomes, cottages, duplex, triplex, that is right on the edge of both Evergreen and Druid Hills. You'll see it on the site plan that was attached to our zoning application. It should look like this in your packet. And this is kind of a master plan that we are working off of in our office for the entirety of the Caraway redevelopment. Y'all probably seen this before, or at least have some memory of it. And again, it's the blocks over to the right-hand side, blocks E, F, G, and D2. And just as Kim had mentioned, these blocks have been slated for residential redevelopment since we rezoned this property back in prior to COVID. And we're glad to finally get these into production. It's part of an overall housing strategy that we have for this site that really kind of runs the gamut from multifamily to attainable housing to more single-family housing, which is what we're doing here. And what we found is that there is a gap in this market, particularly for more dense residential development in the townhomes and cottages that are less maintenance required. And that helps people that are getting a little bit upwards in age, and they may not want to maintain a house, and they may want to come over, still want to be a part of the community, and can come over and be part of something that's less maintenance intensive versus, yards and roofs and things of that nature. But also people that are on the front end that are trying to get into a situation where they can afford a house, and they're maybe, in a residency or something at UAB, want to get into a neighborhood that's close by so they can get to and from work very quickly, because this is literally 5 minutes from the downtown core. And so we found that in our market studies, that is a really big gap that we need to try to come in and fill. And we've seen that be successfully pulled off in other parts, mainly in the suburbs of Birmingham, but we want to kind of pull this downtown when we have this opportunity. And it definitely fits into a larger housing strategy we have across this site. One thing that's not illustrated on this site plan is we have a number of what we call scattered lots throughout Norwood and Druid Hills that were part of this transaction when we bought this property from Lovelady. We're really working with both Housing Authority of Birmingham as well as Neighborhood Housing Services, because we don't do true lot single-family development, but we're trying to work with them on, let's come up with a strategy for how we put these lots back into production, build single-family homes on these lots that are affordable, that allow first-time home buyers to come in, and we have specific programs for them to come in and buy those houses. So that's been something we've been really after, and we have about 20 to 30 lots in that category. They're really not represented here, but it's something we're actively working on as an overall strategy for housing on this site. Sorry, that's probably too much information, but at least.
Well, so the drawing that we have right here, it cuts off your development where we can't see all of it.
Yes, you can,
Do you have something that shows?
I'm sorry, I didn't bring copies there.
Well, this whole end was gone. But it's really a duplicate of what is on the end we can see, so.
Yes,
Okay, but the ones that are included are D, 2E, and F?
yes.
Or
Our
is G included in this?
Kim
Future
will have to check
development?
me. Yes, Block G is included as well, and that will be our third phase, but it would be similar.
Okay. And what is the reason that you need to rezone this from D4 to D5?
The main reason was setbacks and working with Kim and Tim on trying to work within a zoning that will allow us to get the density and the setbacks that we need to make this work. And so the suggestion was, hey, D5 kind of works for that. What we're trying to do is make sure we create a very, medium density, urban inspired layout of housing that addresses the street frontages appropriately. And Tim, I don't know if you want to jump in and answer some of that, but really looking at the way the setbacks work in D4 versus D5 was the reason we went to D5.
Okay, and what would be the maximum height that you would be looking for these
The maximum
buildings?
height in D5, I think, is up to 120, but we're willing to voluntarily.
D5 currently is 60 feet, and
Okay.
we're looking at changing it to 35 feet.
Yeah, and we're willing to voluntarily impose a Q condition for 35. We have no intention to get above 35. The townhomes and cottages don't exceed that.
Yeah, you'd have to put elevators in anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, do members of the committee have questions?
Yeah, as I'm looking at some kind of envisioning, Park Place as a, local example of what the development might potentially look like.
Yes,
Is that accurate?
that's a good example. There's also some cottage development over in Avondale that was done that we've
Yeah.
looked at. That has a little bit more, less density than this one does. But again, here, we're really kind of looking at it as the totality of the mixed-use environment and producing a very walkable, system to where people can easily go out their front door and walk down the street and go to a restaurant or an entertainment venue or, a golf simulator or things of that nature where they're not having to get out in their car, but they can use the pedestrian infrastructure and the bike infrastructure that has started to be put in place over there. Really along 25th Street, you can begin to see that. And that'll be incorporated throughout the development over time as more and more infrastructure is put back in place.
Right.
And so it's creating a very walkable environment for folks to get out and use and for both exercise and just access to things that you do every day.
So do you have the same vision for Block G as well?
We do. It's obviously on the very top end, the northern end of our set, and it's right up against some single-family housing. It's right behind the gas station, if you recall, that is along Caraway Boulevard before you cross over to get to Finley on the bridge.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? So do you have any drawings or schematics or visioning pieces?
We do not,
that-
other than the layout that's there, we do not. But we can share those with staff, or I can even probably share them with council when we come to council.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to know what your vision is of how these things might look.
Yes, absolutely. We have those, I just did not include those in this packet.
Okay, anything else before we decide? Well, I do want to be sure that you said you'd be willing to commit to 35 feet, because we haven't changed D5 yet, so I don't want to mess up anybody's expectations.
No, 35 feet will work.
Okay, thank you. So we will get that in, Mr. Staffer? Included, a condition, a Q condition. Okay, so then all we need is a motion.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion for approval with the inclusion of a Q condition that limits the height to 35 feet.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Oh, do we need to hear from the public? No, we don't need to hear from the public. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that passes, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, our next case, ZAC 2025-00013, has been delayed to the next planning and zoning meeting due to the applicant having broken down in Mississippi. So that will be on our next agenda. Then the next case after that is ZAC 2025-00016.
The next item is the AC 2025-16. This property is located in the ASIPCO Finley Neighborhood Association. The location is 1700 31st Avenue North and 1701 32nd Avenue North. The applicant is requesting to change the zoning from QC2 Qualified General Commercial to C2 General Commercial in order to remove a Q condition from a rezoning case in 1989. The case was Z40-89. And the only uses that were permitted in that rezoning case were a restaurant, a motel, and a truck stop. And the applicant is proposing to have a motorcycle training facility at this location. So the subject property contains 2 parcels, approximately 2.75 acres. The motorcycle training facility will provide a safe environment for development, safety, education, and advanced riding techniques for its clients. There's a designated training area for the riders that will teach them all of the tools at the motorcycle training center. They will have both indoor and outdoor courses that are available on select days and weekends that will be led by a certified motorcycle trainer. The company's name is Pro Rider Birmingham. They will have a scholarship program available for students in the neighborhood. Their proposed hours of operation will be Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and they plan on having 4 instructors on site. The city's adopted long-range land use plan for this area identifies the property as general commercial. We do not have a definition in the ordinance for a motorcycle training facility, so we would be considering this as a trade school. And in the C2 district, if approved by the city council, then the applicant will need a special exception to operate the trade school. That is one of the requirements for a trade school in a C2 district. The applicant meets all of the requirements. There are 14 parking spaces provided, which exceed the maximum, so that will need to be addressed. And then 1 bicycle space will be required. The landscape comments for this particular site, the type C landscaping buffer would be required where the C2 abuts the D3 single family residential zoning, and 1 street tree per 40 feet of street frontage on all 4 sides of the site will be required. No comments from our floodplain staff, and no comments from our stormwater staff. Any construction would require the usual permits. There were no comments from the Birmingham Department of Transportation. This property is located in the North Birmingham Framework Plan area, and the ASIPCO Finley Neighborhood Association. They met on June the 4th, 2025, and voted to support the rezoning request. The vote was 17 to support and 3 votes to not support. The Zoning Advisory Committee met on July 15th, 2025, and they voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the rezoning request to the City Council. And we do have the applicant present to answer any questions.
Thank you. If the applicant would come forward and explain to us what you're doing, what your plan is.
Hi, good evening. My name's Abdu Amir. I am the owner of Pro Rider Birmingham, and as luck would have it, I grabbed the wrong binder today for my presentation, but I did bring some literature on what Pro Rider does, so that you can see exactly what the students get when they show up. Ultimately, what Pro Rider does is we facilitate a training environment that starts with classroom and moves out into practical exercise out in the parking lot that has 3 levels of training. Our course curriculum has the lowest level for the brand new rider, the basic defensive rider, and we go over stopping, starting, the most simplest things. And then we, in the next level of training, we have the precision and control. All of the speed is done less than 20 miles an hour. It is primarily teaching you how to navigate through a parking lot or around other vehicles and pedestrians without duck walking with your motorcycle. It gives you control over the clutch, throttle, and braking. And then we have an advanced class that gets people used to leaning the motorcycle and braking and learning how to not brake and with your bike leaning over and stuff like that. So we've been very excited about getting this going. I purchased my business license through Jefferson County back in February, and it's taken us to this point. I've been paying $3,000 on that parking lot every month just to get here to see you guys. We've had motorcycles out there. We've done promo videos, and we're trying to capitalize on TikTok and try and get the business name out there, because we also provide private lessons, for people that don't want to come through the junction to receive the training and stuff like that. So I'm afraid I forgot your name, I'm sorry. But anyway, she touched on the fact that Pro Rider Birmingham has already established a student scholarship for an ASIPCO neighborhood student. We had expected it to be rather significant at this point, but because we're not able to generate revenue and do all the great things that we've wanted to, we'll be, even not being able to facilitate training this year, we'll still be able to support one student at the end of this next school year. We have huge ideas for that property. That's about everything. I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Okay, do members of the yes, Dr. O'Quinn.
Yeah, so I think we actually had been scheduled to hear this case previously, so actually went to your website and kind of looked at some of your information, and what it looks like to me is that the training is similar to what would be required for a mounted police officer, so a motorcycle police officer. So is that accurate, the type of maneuvering and having cones and stuff placed in the parking
is
lot that
absolutely
they have
accurate.
to
Right.
chicane through and that sort
Correct.
of thing?
Pro Rider Birmingham will bring advanced level training to the civilian. And obviously, you're not gonna be able to just sign up for the advanced class, but, what we would do is our curriculum is built on the foundation where if you have riding experience and you respect the motorcycle and you want to get better, you start with the defensive riding course and you work your way up through the precision and control, and you will get to that level of training of a professional motor skills officer. Absolutely.
What about special events? Would you guys be planning on hosting, you know, special events for, like, I don't know, you know, motorcycle aficionados, to, you know, gatherings or that sort of thing?
So we don't plan on doing regular events like the motorcycle community commonly refers to it as bike night, stuff like that, where they pretty much pull up in a parking lot or a business and they goof off and loud music and all this other stuff.
Right.
The only special events that we intend on having at that property would be special motor skills fundraising events. You know, most motorcycle clubs, they will do fundraiser rides, you know, raising money for St. Jude's or breast cancer and stuff like that. Because we are primarily police motor officers, as she explained, every last one of our motor officers is police trained and currently employed by a department in the greater Birmingham area. And we look forward to hosting events that will raise money for things like, you know, the FOP and, you know, downed officer and things like that, on top of, you know, adding to the scholarship that's already been established.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have.
Counselor Smitherman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Was the neighborhood advised of the use of the property?
Yes, ma'am. So when, man, this has been a battle. So I ended up purchasing my business license at the county and came over here to the city to get my city license. And that's when I was informed about my Q conditions. And I was already tied into a lease. So I knew that I had to make it work. And I asked the folks, nice folks in zoning, I understand that my application is non-refundable. So how do I ensure that I get my money's worth? And they said, reach out to the community, see if you can show up at the community meeting, have a couple minutes of their time, and if you feel like they're feeling it, then submit your application. The application will be sent to the community, and then they'll vote on it. And so I did. I went out there. They reluctantly let me speak for a couple minutes, and I had folks, you know, coming up to me after the meeting, and they were like, man, this is fantastic. You know, that parking lot's just been sitting there, and we like your vision, so let us know if there's anything we can help. And I went home and I told my wife, I said, I am doing this. We're gonna move forward. So then, again, I came to zoning, filled out my application, went back, I got put on the agenda to speak at the ASIPCO neighborhood meeting, and they were very receptive, and here we are.
So what are your hours of operation?
So it was filling out the application. It made me select, you know, just certain hours, but all of our training are either 4 and 8 hour blocks. So the defensive rider and the precision and control are only 4-hour classes. The advanced class is the only one that we provide that is an 8-hour class. And most everybody is looking for Friday, Saturday, Sunday training because it's closer to the weekend, or they can go to training and recover the next day. But I made an agreement with the Asipco neighborhood that I would not be. I tried to.
What
I showed up to the Asipco meeting and I believe it was, I believe it was the sergeant at arms that I spoke to when I got there. He was turning everything on and checking the microphone and everything. And I walked in, my wife and I walked in and I set my book bag down and went up and introduced myself to him again. And he said, yeah, I remember you. You're the motorcycle guy. Yes, sir. And I said, I have a presentation. Where can I set my laptop up, so that everybody can see it? And he said, right here. And he brought me up there, and all it was just a HDMI cable. Hooked it up, got the presentation ready to go. I had my prompter ready and everything. And when it was my turn to come up, I moved the mouse on the computer and all the screens opened up. And the president of the neighborhood committee said, absolutely not. You don't have permission from a SIPCO to use their equipment. And I said, well, I mean, it's already plugged in, and she said, absolutely not. So I unplugged the computer and I went completely off of memory. But I guess to answer your question, ma'am, there was a strong effort made to show them everything that I had worked on, because I made that presentation for them.
Okay. Well, that's interesting then, how they were able to still vote if you didn't present anything to them. Okay, that's all my questions.
I'm kind of shocked that this is ending up in a residential neighborhood. So what kind of noise are all of these motorcycles going to be making when these people are being trained? I'm not worried about the guy who's going to ride his bicycle to the place, but all the motorcycles, I assume everyone coming will be riding a motorcycle. And they make a lot of noise. So how's that going to work out?
So when everything we do is at low speed, and we're not talking about choppers. We're not talking about, your the bike that in your head pulls up next to you at a light that, sounds like it's got an ear-splitting exhaust on it. We're talking about your standard cruising motorcycle that is actually rather quiet unless you make it loud. Everything is done less than 25 miles an hour, even at the braking exercise. At any given time, there are only 2 bikes moving for safety reasons. And when I say only 2 bikes, if you imagine the parking lot and you have all the bikes lined up and you walk them through the next cone course. Once everybody has an understanding, an instructor will demo the course. That's 1 bike moving. He'll park. If everybody understands the course, your first rider will attempt the course, and if they complete it, then they come back and they park. And once everybody in the class goes through the course, then they'll do a second attempt. Once that first bike makes a second attempt, we do what's called a breeze out. Because a lot of motorcycles are air cooled, you need to have air passing through the motorcycle in order to keep the temperature down. So you have one motorcycle doing a breeze out, and then you have another off the second bike doing the second attempt. By the time they're done with the second attempt, that first bike is parking, and they're doing a breeze out. And then the third bike is, and we do that so that you don't have even controlled chaos. Everything is very controlled. You have everything being done at a slow speed, and to include the breeze out. It's very slow. It doesn't sound like somebody getting on the interstate and going through all the gears just like they're, like they're trying to hit warp speed. Everything is very slow and controlled. And I welcome city council and anybody from the neighborhood to come down on any designated day, and we can do, we can do a demonstration. Like the councilman said, he went to the website and took a look at everything, or some of the pieces. Everything's very slow. You can fire up any one of the videos and turn the volume all the way up, and you can hear it. Everything is very low decibel. Everything's very quiet.
So they'll come very quietly and they'll leave very quietly. I'm assuming they all ride their motorcycles to get to your
Yes.
place, so
Right.
they'll be respectful of the neighborhood.
I would hope so.
Well, I would
My-
hope so too, because if it was my neighborhood, it would be more than hope.
Sure. So our parking lot is approximately 20 feet from the entrance ramp to I-65, and 40 feet from the exit ramp. And we're right there at a traffic light and a stop sign. If somebody came off the interstate and came to the red light and they wanted to try and rev their engine for 15 feet, I don't imagine anybody's gonna want to do that. And there isn't enough distance for anybody to create that much racket in 15 feet.
Well, that's good to know.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, Councilor Smith. So I'm just looking at it on the satellite view. So it's a big concrete slab right now. Did you guys do the slab there, or was that existing when you acquired the property?
We have not done anything to the property foundationally. Everything you see from Google Street View is
Yeah.
exactly how it is, yeah.
Does staff know what was the historical use of the property previously? Okay,
I imagine we have residents who know,
yeah.
who are here in the audience to speak.
I mean, it looks like, kind of similar to our other case that the applicant's not here for. It looks like an 18-wheeler parking lot, that's just paved.
Yes, sir. So as a young patrolman here at the city of Birmingham, I do remember when that was a storage facility for campers and car haulers.
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, they used to do RV sales there, I think, yeah. Okay. Okay, I think that's it
So,
for now.
Councilor Smith?
You may have said this already, but what made you decide to pick this location, especially kind of like what Council Abbott said, in the middle of a residential area?
So I almost touched on it. So we'll go back to the fundamentals of what we do for a business. So we're moving vehicles around, and you need space. I could probably teach all three of my curriculums with half the amount of space. But the more space, the better, the more of a buffer we have for any incidents, So, when I decided, I found out that Riders Harley-Davidson, Tuscaloosa, and Heart of Dixie Harley-Davidson all ceased their Harley motorcycle training curriculum. They just stopped. So now you have all of these folks that ride motorcycles in the greater Birmingham area that have to go to the University of Montevallo or they have to go to Montgomery or to Huntsville in order to attend any type of motorcycle training, any type of motorcycle safety training. So I had been thinking about doing this for quite some time, and when I heard that nobody was teaching anymore in Birmingham, it just so happened. I drove by a SIPCO. Again, I still work for the city of Birmingham. And I was driving down 32nd Avenue, and I was like, that parking lot has been sitting vacant for several years now. And I called the owner, told him what I'd like to do, what I was wanting to do, and he said, absolutely, let's sit down and talk about it. And that's how I got there. But I knew, again, working for the city of Birmingham over 20 years, I knew what it had been in the past. So it never crossed my mind that instead of having tractor trailer trucks and big rigs and stuff pulling in, it never crossed my mind that someone would have a problem with a couple of slow-moving motorcycles and not have a problem with Colonial RV or whatever it was before.
Okay, thank you. If you'd have a seat on the front row, we're going to hear from residents who've come to speak regarding this. I'm assuming that residents are here for that because I've seen nodding heads. So if you would come forward and speak to us regarding your thoughts, either concerns or support.
Mary Moore, 1622 36th Avenue North. I live in the neighborhood. When I first saw them there, I called the neighborhood president because you've got houses on 3 sides of that property. That's the old site of the Egan Elementary School. When it is the old site of the Egan Elementary School. And when the RV place on the average won, because the neighborhood was against it, and that was prior to us doing framework plans, that even then when I was neighborhood president and we did not want the RV there, the city overruled us because our plans over the time, even when Egan was there and closed, was to put housing on that piece of property. When we did our framework, and I don't know what happened to that plan, it was plans to put houses on that property once they overruled us for the RV. He talked about the neighborhood meeting. The neighborhood president and I talk on a regular basis because I called her in the earlier part of this year when I saw them out there to ask if they had come before the neighborhood. And she said they had, but there was some type of disagreement at that time. When he talks about them not able to make their presentation, for some reason the neighborhood moved from the church having its meeting to a SIPCO's property. And that's what she was explaining, that if he wanted to make a presentation, they would have had to have been contacted in advance to get permission from a SIPCO to be able to use their equipment in order for him to make the presentation. So that's why she said that they couldn't do it, because they didn't know in advance. I certainly don't agree with them being there. The first time if you diagonal to that property, it's the first house built in the SIPCO Finley neighborhood, that side, I know since I built my house in the 70s, which implies that when I talked to one of the family members built in that house, and their family has bought majority of the houses directly behind First Baptist or SIPCO, and is one of the younger family members that built that house on the corner. So, in our framework plan, it's not that we're anti-business, but we like to be like any other community, and when people come to purchase property, explain what the neighborhood has for the intentions, and it was put houses there. And even in the reimagined plan that the mayor brought to us a few years ago, It's still the intent that we want to build up the neighborhood, that part specifically, so that we can encourage younger people to come in childbearing age, so that we can repopulate the whole area. But I am against it. When I first talked to the neighborhood president, she was, that night that everybody showed up, I got a suggestion. We have people that come in, I don't know who bring them in, but they're not people who regularly attend the neighborhood meetings. It's almost difficult to find out where they really live. But if you've been to a SIPCO friendly neighborhood, you know you don't have 30 people at a meeting. Then all of a sudden, when these votes come up, I don't know who brings those people in, but they have several addresses that they use that it's difficult to know where the people live in the first place. But to make a long story short, our intent with the framework plan, our intent when they the school system closed down the old Egan School, SIPCO Pipe worked with us then, and our intent was to develop the property for residential living. So that's been the neighborhood's intent, always been. If you go back and look at our framework plan, we purposely put Q zones on different pieces of property for our protection to make sure that we wouldn't have an undesirable business to locate on that piece of property. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And our report does not tell us what the framework plan projects this property to be. It just says it's located in the North Birmingham Framework Plan area.
If you go to the page that has the adopted land use, let me go back. It has a, let's see,
What
page
what
number.
I'm on page 31.
On page 29, at the very bottom, the city's adopted long-range land use plan identifies this property as general commercial.
Okay, so that was in the framework plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, general commercial.
And excuse me, but I don't know how that got there when we specifically, in months and nights and weeks and days, we work with the framework, with the staff for the information that we put way even before, when the city came to us about closing the school. It's always been for that site to put residential property. So how, when it comes to the city hall, what the citizens request is changed to commercial? There's no way in the world any of us would have thought about using that as a commercial piece of property, right smack dab in the middle of the community. Does that make sense? It just bothers me for the amount of time Mr. Tombrella and the staff work with us, piece of property from Cottageville all the way down to a SIPCO Finley. And we're constantly fighting the same battles we fought when the citizens made known what we want all of the pieces of property in the North Birmingham community to be used for. So who changed it? Who changed our usage? It has never been thought of you leaving that piece of property as a commercial. And before, it was a school. It was the old Egan Elementary School on that piece of property. So when the school board came about closing it, I think the first realtor was Willie Casey Company. We've always talked about putting houses there. When we had the opportunity to have input into the framework, same thing. So who changes it, and does our opinion make any difference? Because I'm learning now, year after year, pieces of property that we know we spent the time to define what we wanted to use it for, now is not what the citizens have said. So it just amazes me how it changes, and what we put down has not made any difference with the city of Birmingham, which is disheartening for us.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Brown, reside at 3115 24th Street North, and I am the chair of our North Birmingham Framework Committee. The first thing that I want to mention is this. From everything that we have read on zoning, including laws coming in from the state of Alabama, once you put a Q condition on a property, it's supposed to be permanent. It was Q conditions placed on there for a reason. What he failed to tell you and realize is that north of that property and south of that property, you have elderly people there and there are homes. To the west of what he wants to do is a church that sits there. And we are supposed to be protecting our residences. That's why that particular corner at the intersection on I-65 and 32nd Avenue was sitting there, because there was supposed to be homes put there. The next thing that I want to mention is this. When he was asked about special events and all that, and he's shouting all the societies and charities they want to do, he failed to mention that at ZAC meeting, he said that on Saturdays, they would have food trucks and stuff out there at their facility. But you got a church next door and elderly people in front, elderly people in the back on there. And that does not make sense. If God has blessed you to live to a certain amount of age, nobody want to wake up in the morning to those loud motorcycles. Because I have never heard a quiet motorcycle, and I used to ride with motorcycles, okay? So I ain't never heard a quiet one. The other thing that he mentioned at ZAC, he said that when they come off of the route, or whatever it is he called what they're doing, they will circle around and go sit on the side and wait until the person that's on the lot get there and do. So now you got idling motorcycles sitting there on the side creating more noise. But I go back to the first point that I made. Q conditions was placed on that property for a reason, and they are supposed to be permanent. And when we get to where we take Q conditions off and open up certain businesses, you leave it open for everything else to come into your city that you do not need in a residential neighborhood. Because there are houses there. You got an active church there. Reverend Todd is the pastor there at First Baptist Church of Sipco. And before we would sit there and even think about allowing a commercial business to come there that close to those residents, that's sad. So we're asking you not to take the Q conditions off of it. Leave it like the people who live there wanted it to be, because we don't want this kind of business at that location. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Reverend Anthony Douglas. I reside at 480 37th Court, better known as Hooper City. I'm the president of the Hooper City neighborhood, as well as the president of the North Birmingham community. I was at the zoning board meeting, and it was said that these motorcycles will be quiet. Let's hit one outside your window and see what happened. Not only that, it was said that there would be a mechanic shop built on that site. Who said it? The man that sits here now. But as the officer of the North Birmingham, I really, really hope that you all consider these people. I'm 68 years old. These people are older than me. They can't go out and buy a house, a 30-year mortgage anymore. So let's make consideration about those people that have. As being a minister, the other part, most of our funerals on Saturdays. What happens when they're trying to, someone is trying to bury their family and you got motorcycles riding around? And he said previously that they would be going around the neighborhood. I was there in the meeting. I can't remember her name. She was there. So I have a problem with this, especially with our seniors. Most of us are sick. And when you do get a little sleep, you're happy. Nothing worse than you doze off to sleep and here go noise. I just thank God for you who sits on this panel and makes the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Mr. Amer, what kind of structures do you plan for this property?
ProRider Birmingham does not plan on changing anything that's on the property other than additional barricades to safeguard picnic tables that we have out in the sitting area. What we've done is we've tried to create a family environment out there. So we have picnic tables with umbrellas and stuff like that. So if you have somebody that wants to come and take the class, their family can actually show up and set up a tent out there on the side and take videos and pictures and make a day of it. There, currently on the property, there are 3 small utility buildings that are slap full of hardware and plumbing from the previous tenant. There is a classroom that we currently occupy. And then there is a metal storage building, a 2-bay metal storage building that is only housing my training motorcycle and traffic cones and ladders and stuff like that. We have not constructed anything on the property. And if I may, the comment about a mechanic shop or whatever, that is actually one of the clauses in my lease. It's that if we're gonna do something on that property, it needs to be directly referencing motorcycle training, whether it be classroom or practical exercise. There will not be any wrenching, no motorcycles brought there for even temporary fixes, other than, someone dropping a motorcycle during class, we get it up and running and we get it on a trailer and get it gone. But that is it. No other changes to the property.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, I don't know. So committee, what is your pleasure here? I'm still trying to figure out how the neighborhood voted 17-3, except that someone mentioned a bunch of people showed up that they didn't know who they were or where they lived. I assume they have to sign in with their street address, but that concerns me. And also, if the neighborhood asked for this to be residential during the framework plans, who decided not to? That would be a question. Yeah, try.
Yeah, I would, I did look at the plan online, and as Kim pointed out, the adopted land use does show it as commercial. I think that, for me, it'd be a little challenging, to dictate, somebody owns that property. It's already zoned commercial. Yeah, we might like to see residential there, but the owner of the property has some property rights. And so, I think a lot of times when we're doing the land use plan, obviously we're looking what's on the ground at the current time. And so, I don't recall, 10 years ago if this was an active site or not. I don't really remember. But I do know that it was zoned at the time. And so I would just leave it at that.
Yeah, of course, we changed a lot of property from industrial to lighter uses, and
We did downzone a lot of heavy industrial property, yes.
yeah, so we did some of what we just said we couldn't figure out how to do.
That would be with the owner's consent and
Well, not necessarily. I think that, so, in the heavy industrial property in particular, when we were looking at rezoning and we were looking at land use, You know, if there are active sites, in particular, you know, we generally left them as they were. In North Birmingham, as you know, there's a lot of heavy industrial property that's being laid vacant for many years in very derelict situations. And so the properties that we downzone, it's similar to where we downzone properties that had been condemned. You know, if an apartment complex had been condemned, it was surrounded by commercial in the West End or different places, or even in North Birmingham, we did downzone those based on the current property condition. You know, so, you know, a SIPCO Finland, or a SIPCO pipe plant sits there, you know, it's zoned heavy industrial. We didn't downzone it. It's an active site. But if you go, you know, east of there, around 33rd Terrace and in that general area, just kind of east of Collegeville, there are many heavy industrial sites there that, you know, are derelict. They're not maintained. They're overgrown. They're not advertised for sale that we could determine. And so in those cases, we did downzone.
This one was kind of derelict too. Anyway, so that being said, back to the committee. What is y'all's preference?
I kind of think we should move forward without a recommendation.
Without one?
I may be in the minority, but
Yeah, Counselor Abbott, I'm looking at, you know, the neighborhood's recommendation, you know. All we have is the information, you know, before us. Apparently, I'm looking for the actual vote. Was it 13 or 17?
17 to 3.
17 that voted in favor, you know. I assume that the
Without
neighborhood
representation.
officers are, you know, checking the sign-in sheets and that sort of thing to, you know, see if they're working with residents. Anyway, I mean, that's the information that we have before us, and, you know, we can speculate about who these folks are, but based on everything presented to us, you know, we have to assume that those are residents, so, you know, my motion that would be, we would move forward with a recommendation to approve,
To approve?
yes.
Well, I can't second that. Would you like to second it? So what if we actually send it back to the neighborhood for an actual presentation? I mean, I would, you know, I wouldn't want anybody to do this to me. You know, I always have a tendency to put myself in everybody's seats and see how would I feel. I'm concerned about noise and disruption to the residents. That's my concern.
Sure, and, you know, I'm looking at that too, and 32nd Avenue is the main entrance to a SIPCO. The employee parking lot is on that street, so, you know, I'm sure there's a regular flow of traffic on 32nd Avenue off of 65, and vice versa, so, you know, this is not I can't imagine that this is a low-traffic residential street. Yes, there are residential homes on there, but there's also commercial uses, you know, gas station right across the street, the credit union, you know, right to a block and a half away. So, in any case, I agree with your recommendation that they have the opportunity to go back to the neighborhood and make a presentation, you know, that they had prepared, so I'm fine with that too.
Okay, Kim Sproul has a
I just wanted some clarification on what your recommendation is. So our applicants do present to the neighborhood their requests, they just didn't do a PowerPoint presentation. So for staff, I just want to understand when you say presentation, what you expect, so we can let the neighborhood know.
Yeah, my expectation would be that they would see what's actually going to be going on that lot to the best of the ability of the applicant, so that they know what to expect.
So perhaps some handouts with site plan, maps.
Yeah, and maybe some pictures from places that are already in operation. You know, how does it work? Because I know what it's like being next to motorcycle groups, and it's noisy.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we convey the correct information to the neighborhood president.
Yeah, I mean, making it a gathering place would not be, I think, acceptable, whereas just training somebody to ride their motorcycle sounds pretty good. But it's the unintended consequences of doing things without really knowing what is going to be done there. That's my concern. And I would have it if it was next door to me. So my recommendation would be we send it back to the neighborhood, send the applicant back to the neighborhood to make a presentation so that they will know what they are getting into rather than guessing.
May I say one last thing?
Well, let us decide whether we have a second or not.
Was that a
Oh,
motion?
yes, well, okay, that was a motion. So my motion is that this be sent back to the neighborhood for a full presentation, so that the residents know what is going to be going on there.
Second.
So, if that were to occur, would that mean that this case has to go back through the ZAC as well?
No, it would have to come back to this committee.
It would be up to this committee, if you want it to come back directly to you, or if you recommend that you send it back to ZAC as well.
Yeah, but I would think if it came back to the committee, I mean, we've heard a lot.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so the motion is that it would come back to the committee.
Right.
You need another second? Second.
Okay, it has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, there we are.
All right.
Now, everyone is going to be cooperative with everyone else, and if he's coming with his presentation, get a SIP code to agree to let him use their equipment, and so on and so forth, so that you actually get a presentation.
I'll call the secretary president so she can clear it up.
Yeah. Y'all, everybody play nice with each other. Okay, our next item is the D5 update. We have an attached memo.
Yes, ma'am, would you like me to hit the high points?
Please.
So staff held a working session on Friday, to discuss the D5 district and some of the issues surrounding the height. And the memo is what the consensus of the working session came up with on Friday. So it was decided that our staff would submit a text change to the Planning Commission at their meeting next Wednesday. And the text change would include the following: a reduction in height for the D5 district duplex and townhouse would be reduced from 45 feet to 35 feet. And multifamily would be reduced from 60 feet to 45 feet. It's page 38, I'm sorry. And that's item number 1. And then in addition, item number 2, for multifamily in D5, instead of a standard B buffer that is now required for any properties in D5 that abut single-family residential, a standard C buffer would be required, which would give a wider buffer with additional planting requirements. And then in addition to that text change, we discussed the creation of possibly 2 new zoning districts that would allow multifamily residential at a height greater than 45 feet. And these districts, we would not have adjacent to single family. This would be similar to what R6 and R6 and R7 were in the old ordinance. They would be almost a buffer district between your D5 and your either mixed use or commercial, where some of your higher density apartments would go. And then we also would like to look at the opportunity to perhaps require some of the character standards that are in our mixed use and urban neighborhood districts in one of these new apartment districts. So not only would you have the requirements of the new district, but you would have the design guidelines for the properties. You would bring them closer to the street. You would have your front porches. It would create design standards compatible with our mixed-use districts where we envision these would abut. But we do need a little bit of time to develop what those 2 districts would look like. So we would like to do some research and have something to the Planning Commission for their review for these 2 new districts at their December Planning Commission meeting.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea, because I think D5 needs to be all brought down to 35 feet, where it blends in with 1- and 2-story houses. Now, this says 45 feet. Well, the multiple family, 45 feet is towering over a 1-story or 2-story home, blocking even the light that gets to that property. So 35 feet makes them all more or less blend in. And I've brought a photograph of a poor 2-story house next to apartments that were allowed in D5, which the height limit, I think, was 35 feet. And even though it is roughly, I mean, it's taller than a house, but at least it's not towering over. And 35 feet blends in with 1- and 2-story houses. 45 feet towers over them.
Yeah, since the consensus of the working session was the 45 instead of the 60 with the standard C buffer. So if that's not acceptable, then we would need to withdraw that item from Planning Commission next week and have another working session to discuss a change.
Well, what we can do is vote on this today and change it to 35 feet.
It's not a text change. It hasn't come to this committee yet. It has to go to the Planning Commission first, and then it would come to the Planning and Zoning Committee. This was just to let the committee know after our working session what the group decided on. But if you would like to see further changes, we're happy to facilitate another working session, perhaps next week, to discuss any additional changes you would like to see before we submit it to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, my feeling is that it's extremely important to maintain this 35-foot height throughout, just for these D5s that are mixed in with single-family residential 1- and 2-story homes. It's a problem. And the framework plan shows D5 zoning with this 60-foot height right next to single-family 1-story homes. Can you imagine what it would be like to have a huge building built next to your little 1-story house? I mean, I'm sure that not too many people here would enjoy that, and I don't think that our folks are going to enjoy it either. So that's, to me, key. D6, creating a new D6 or D7 or maybe D6 and D7 for places that are out in the sticks and don't bother anyone else is fine. But in heavily developed neighborhoods where you already have these 1- and 2-story level homes, it just is not right to build monstrosities next to them that block their light and even breezes. It's amazing what it does when you build something huge next to something so small. I don't know how y'all feel about it. You've got 1-story and 2-story homes in your districts too.
Yeah, my only concern would be about the, creation of legal non-conforming. So I don't know how you solve, for that. I'm guessing that your recommendation of, limiting multifamily to 45 feet, that most of the existing multifamily in D5, falls within that 45-foot height limit. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, when you're going from it was 35, then it was 45, then 60, and we feel like going back to the 45 is going to help us eliminate some of the legal nonconforming that would be created. We're not going to capture everything. We're aware of that, but that's why we thought the 45 was a good compromise, because it would, like you said, help us eliminate some of those legal nonconformities.
So what about, in your memo here, you have that the planning zoning staff will research the creation of a new zoning district that will allow for multifamily residential at a height of greater than 45 feet. So what if you said that you would research the creation of a new zoning district that will allow for multifamily residential at a height greater than 35 feet?
Well, that's something we can discuss. I mean, we did spend almost 2 hours on Friday and came up with this in our working session with staff. So if y'all would like to change this, then perhaps we need to set up another working session before it goes to Planning Commission next week. We can schedule something for next week or the week after.
Yeah, essentially, are you guys suggesting that we could say, for example, have a D6 zone district that would encompass this, whether it's multifamily over 35 feet or 45 feet? Yeah, that's what you guys are essentially, conceptualizing, is that there would be a new zone district created to accommodate these properties.
Right, so the discussion on Friday, what we kind of all decided we would present to Planning Commission, we would have D1, 2, 3, 4 at 35 feet. D5, everything except for multifamily would be at 35 feet. The multifamily would be 45 in D5 with an enhanced buffer adjacent to residential. And the reason we didn't want to go all the way down to 35 was because of the increase that we would have in legal nonconforming structures. So we do realize there are some properties now that are R5. And there are some D5 that are taller than 45. And so these new districts, once we create them, that would allow some of, we were kind of thinking some of the apartments in the Highland Park area, there's some in Southside that are adjacent to commercial and mixed use, that they're not really D5, but they're not really mixed use. They're all residential, but they are taller and have more units. And so this new zoning district would help accommodate those who are legal nonconforming now, but then once the district's created, we could come back and rezone those to a new district that would allow them to eliminate their legal nonconformities. We don't want to continue to create legal nonconforming uses and structures. So that was kind of, we brainstormed on some ways to create a new district for some of, because right now we don't, the majority of our new apartments are rezoning to mixed use. We also have some that have rezoned to general commercial. But part of that is because we don't have a zoning district that's kind of in the middle for apartments that are on the edge of a neighborhood that are getting into your mixed-use commercial districts. So the team that met Friday felt like looking at the creation of this new district would help provide a buffer between the two, if that makes sense. In addition to maybe requiring those character standards that we have in the mixed-use districts now.
So, I mean, if you're gonna go that direction, having, you know, it's having a, you know, what Counselor Abbott is suggesting, that limiting the height of multifamily to 35 feet in D5, you know, and then having a completely different zone district that allows multifamily to be higher than 35 feet, you know, that could work.
Then you're gonna have a gap. So what we've usually always done with our zoning districts with the height, if you start at your larger single-family residential, typically, if you look at the area and dimensional regulations chart, you gradually increase the height in your districts. That's what we've done in the mixed-use districts. That's what our older residential districts did. We had E1 all the way to R8, and you gradually increase the height. So we could still potentially have D5 35 feet next to a D6 that's 80 feet. And then there's going to be a huge gap there. So that's why we thought the 45 was a good compromise in the middle to meet that gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what's the, in considering this, I'm also thinking about Highland Park. But the mixed use in Highland Park, what is the density of the mixed use zoning there in Highland Park, and what's the height restrictions?
It depends on which district. Mixed use downtown does not have a height
Right.
limitation. And it also doesn't have a density requirement.
But Highland Park specifically, Highland Park
Oh,
Highland Park wouldn't have mixed use downtown. It would be mixed use low or
mixed use medium. And then perhaps, some residents don't like the idea of converting an apartment building to mixed use just because it fits the height requirements and the density. So a new zoning district that doesn't allow commercial uses, but high-density residential could fit that better.
But what's the height limitation for mixed use low?
Mixed use low is 45, is 60. It's either 60 or 65, yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't have the situation that you described earlier where, you have single-family residential that maxes out at 35 feet. What we're trying to create is a zone district between the single-family residential maxed out at 35 feet and the mixed-use low that's at 45 feet. That's what you just said, right? Or
Well,
mixed-use medium?
I didn't say mixed use low. I would say the majority, I think we're using mostly mixed use medium.
And that's 60.
And that's 60, and that's why we thought 45 was a good, if you go from 35 to 60, I mean, that's where we are now.
But what I'm suggesting is that if you have, say, a D6, you know, that, has that fills that gap between 35 and 60, we could, you know, that would solve the legal non-conforming issue.
Yeah, that's why we need to research it and see what that height needs to be. We don't know. We need to see what legal non-conforming structures we're creating and what that height number would be. We know we're not gonna cover everything. But we did spend a couple hours on this Friday, so if you guys, we can withdraw our request to Planning Commission next Wednesday for the text change, and we can set something up, to go through, if you'd like, since we need to have another working session. It seems like this was premature.
Well, it's not premature. We're moving in the right direction. The idea is to stop the construction of these ginormous buildings right next to someone's single-family home in neighborhoods where we've had a lot of that kind of mess already. So we just don't want to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again by doing that to people and doing it to the neighborhoods. You know, and some of the changes in the framework plan have put D5 right next to a one-story house. You know, so that to me is a really big problem. And if D5 didn't have multiple family in it, then the 35 feet would be fine, and we would have townhomes and,
I'm not changing.
what were those other things? Duplexes. Only in D5.
So can we regroup with you guys next week to discuss the changes?
I think so. Are you game next week? Next week.
Okay.
Okay, now we are to our next. Do what? To see what next week looks like.
Well, you know, we have the animal control. Ordinance public hearing on this. It starts, the doors open at 5:30.
Planning commission is at 5. So, 3:30? 3:30?
3:30.
3:30?
3:30.
That would be at the time of our regularly scheduled committee of the whole, but that's gonna be canceled.
Okay, great. Recommend.
Okay, so our recommendation is we get together at 3:30 next Wednesday. Do you want to get together here or in your conference room?
Let me check and see if it's available, and then I'll email your staff.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, we are now to item 5, framework plan rezoning cases. But they have D5 in them. So if we approve them, it'll be a problem. So I guess we'll defer those to our next meeting also. Then we have item 6, ZBA member update.
Yes, ma'am. It was brought to staff's attention that one of our ZBA members ran for council in another municipality. And so we inquired as to her residency address, and I included it in your packet. It appears that she lived in the city of Birmingham when she was appointed to ZBA, and she has since moved. Her current address is in the city limits, but she uses her daughter's mailing address, which is Center Point, Alabama. and she has attended 3 out of the last 15 meetings. And after a consultation with Dr. Lee, he suggested that we bring that before the committee.
Yeah, definitely, because we used to have attendance requirements that we seem to have sort of lost track of. But if somebody has attended that few meetings, they should have already been gone, whether they lived in the city of Birmingham or not. And we used to have staff that kept up with it, attendance. And
We do.
and recommended to us when people were falling behind significantly.
Right, which is why we did consult with Dr. Lee about a month ago. Well, I guess it's been about 2 months since the election when we discovered this.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and make the first announcement on Tuesday that we're looking for another member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment and see if we can't get moving.
Would it be possible for the committee to ask for a letter of resignation?
Oh, yeah, I
For
think
her
that would
term?
be a
Okay.
great idea.
Okay.
We shouldn't have to ask with attendance like that, but I guess we do.
And then all of the other members have been doing a really good job. The new ones have been great. We thank you for your help in finding them.
Well, I'll go ahead and make the announcement on Tuesday since we have to make it twice
Okay,
and at least get some resumes moving in the right direction.
that'd be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else before we adjourn? Well, we have D5 zoning in there, and if we change the zoning, then we will have made a mess again. It has been moved and properly seconded that